All right, cool. Well, yep, of course, as always, Laura is absolutely right. I'll cover my content today quite briskly, and I do hope that you get value out of it. So, I've tried to pack in as many useful points about what we've learned from essentially from teaching L&D teams and folks who work in learning functions in the enterprise customers that we serve, and what we've learned about equipping them with AI in their job role. So, but it's not just a matter of using AI in L&D work. We found as well that there's something special about where enterprise L&D professionals sit because, like any professional role, there's an opportunity to use AI in that work, but there is also a need for us as the owners of learning in our organization to be the champions that enable the other types of functional teams in our organization to use AI, right? So kind of the two-pronged approach that I've taken here as we're thinking about AI and L&D, the first question is, how can we as L&D professionals use AI to help us with our work? And the second prong is, how can we help enable and use learning as a tool to promote adoption of AI and use of AI across the rest of our organization? So the way I've got this organized here, just a few quick talking points. I will talk a little bit about sort of what I really think the disruption is with AI, because it's not necessarily what you think. I'll talk a little bit about how I like to view AI as a cognitive automation tool, a little bit like a robot. And I think that's a good lens to view it through as you're thinking about where to use AI, how AI can help with our work and with other teams' work. And then I'll give you a few ideas about specifically how AI can help L&D professionals do work, save us time, automate stuff, how we can become power users for AI, or at least get you started. And then number 5 here, you see a few different use cases. Some of the things that AI is very useful for if you're an L&D professional, analyzing data, interpreting stuff, summarizing meetings, analyzing survey responses, generating assessment questions, things like that. AI is great for all that stuff. And then, as I mentioned, I'll talk a little bit about becoming an enterprise enabler, helping the rest of your organization use AI, because as L&D professionals, that's part of our job. And people will be turning to us for that and asking us for that if they have not already. And I've got a couple of demos and a couple little bonus handouts that I'll share with you. The first one is on using content that's not learning content to transform it into learning content. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to it. And then if we have time, I've got a little image generation demo for you. And a lot of our learners have expressed interest in the image generating AI tools as well. And then I'll deal with these when we get there, but I've got a sample acceptable use policy that you can use as part of the enterprise adoption roadmap. And then I've got also a readiness assessment that's not mentioned there, but I've got a sample there, and we can share those materials with you in the chat or in the follow-up email that you receive from Skills. Okay, so just a couple quick hits here around what a survey of 130 L&D teams told us. And if you look at this data, you'll see that there's a few themes here. So the first theme is that obviously everybody is leaning into AI, right? So 77, 3/4 of people in L&D teams say, yep, integrating AI is critical for our organizational success. So 3/4 of people think AI is important. But if you look just below here, 64%, a majority, also don't really understand AI, and they need to be upskilled here, right? So that should catch our attention as L&D professionals right away. Our teams, our own L&D teams, but also the rest of our organizational teams need to be upskilled. But then if you go over here to the right, you see some other interesting things, which are that, first of all, although everybody agrees that AI is important, nobody wants learning content that's just generated by AI. And if you've used AI at all very much, you'll understand why this is, because it's kind of generic, flat, lifeless content, right? So, serving as an author or a subject matter expert is not necessarily what AI is good at. And then, of course, on the flip side, not very many people want L&D content that's made by AI. So people think that AI is important. They want to learn how to use AI. They want learning on AI, but they don't want AI generated content on AI. They want human experts to help them understand and navigate AI skills. And so this is from L&D teams, but much is true of other types of functional roles as well. So I always like to show this slide here. Any learning content that you guys consume or that I present or that Skills presents, it's got to be constantly updated because things are changing so quickly. Now, this is true of these first 3 points here, the AI products, their features, and the tech. But it's also true of these items 4, 5, and 6, and 7 here as well. That there are lawsuits happening. There's a lot of disruption happening in the workforce. We're already seeing erosion of certain job sectors because AI can take on some of that functional work. Don't necessarily know that it's going to replace any big jobs very soon, but in the midterm, I don't know. It's moving in that direction. So there's a lot of disruption there. And then, of course, every time any of these things change, it opens up on the negative side new potential risks, and then on the positive side, it opens up new potential use cases. So we want to keep our eye on that stuff, right? So the message here is find those sources of information that you trust. Find those feeds on LinkedIn. Subscribe to the newsletters. I really like Quartz a lot. I like The Economist. I like the OpenAI community on LinkedIn to subscribe to. Even if you don't have to spend a lot of time, even if you don't read the newsletter every day, just get something in your feed so that you have something to alert you to changing. Things are changing all the time. So with that, let's talk a little bit about what generative AI is good at and what it's not good at. Just a quick list, certainly not a comprehensive list, but this is a list to kind of get your head going on what AI is good at. And if you look at this list, you'll notice something. You'll notice that for the most part, these use cases are oriented around the use of language, right? So generating text, answering questions, translating from language to language, mimicking somebody's writing styles. We'll skip basic problem solving, summarizing info, summarizing meeting notes, recommending resources, role-playing. These are all language-based use cases, right? That's because the fundamental technology of generative AI is built on top of these LLMs, or these large language models that are, gigantic bodies of text, the entire internet, all these books, all of Wikipedia, tons of Reddit threads and stuff like that. And the AI companies use all that text to train the models to essentially turn all that language into math. And then once it's math, it can use statistical techniques to analyze the relationships between that, and then it turns it back into language. So it's using a statistical model to model how we as humans use language. So now, it can do a little bit of math and stuff like that, but primarily where the AI shines is on language-based use cases. So that's interesting to us as L&D professionals because most of what we do is oriented around written content or language-based content, voiceovers, narration, video, learning resources, assessments. All these things are language-based. So we don't really need to employ AI to do a bunch of calculus or physics or something like that, right? Like we're interested in content generation, content transformation, synthesizing learning content and things like that. So there's a lot of really good use cases there for AI, but we want to be aware of things that AI is not really great at too, which starts with this real-time updates, right? So like AI can surf the web a little bit and access things on websites. And so there is, in that regard, AI can access information that may be real-time. But what I mean by real-time updates is the training data that powers the models that you're using when you use ChatGPT or Claude or any of these other foundational models, those training models take a long time to calibrate and train and deploy. So right now, like I think the last time I heard, the training data and the model training was cut off at the end of 2022, right? So anything that you ask, yeah, Scott in the chat, totally agree. Like Perplexity is great at that. But the thing to keep in mind is being able to navigate web-based content in real time, that's one thing. But the information that has gone into the way that the AI actually reasons and processes information, that training data has a cutoff point. And so when you're talking to an AI, you're talking to an AI that is not aware of anything that has happened since the end of 2022. So just it's something to keep in mind, right? Like AI's foundational models are really big computational projects, so they don't get updated in real time. It's a long cycle time. AI is not going to be a substitute for a SME, although there was a funny comment here in the chat. Maybe taking a dig at SMEs, depends on the quality of your SMEs. I guess that's a conversation for another day. I'm sure we've all worked with SMEs that maybe weren't much better than AI, but hopefully they are. But whether that's true or not, AI is not necessarily going to be the equivalent of a SME or have deep expertise. AI doesn't understand context except for the context that you give it. So, right, when I teach classes on using generative AI in a professional role, I always tell people after the first day, go home and repeat this mantra to yourself. Context is everything. Context is everything. The more you can help an AI understand the context of your situation, your question, your project, the better and higher quality of output you're going to get from that AI. But just off the shelf, the AI doesn't really understand anything about your situation, so it's going to be of limited use. AIs can't avoid bias because there's bias in the training data, and then a few things that AIs certainly cannot do. They have no emotional intelligence. They can't understand the finer points of people's career motivations. They can't read body language. They can't stand in front of a room full of learners and deliver an engaging presentation. They can't do any of the things that we rely on humans to do. Outside of complex text-based interactions, Scott's making me laugh in the chat. I got to close the chat window. They can only cope with so much complexity, and outside of a thread that you have running, they're not going to remember, right? So AI companies are working on features to do this so that interactions that you've had in other chat threads with ChatGPT, they're working on features so that it can kind of remember some things. But for now, it doesn't remember much about that stuff. So in a chat thread, it'll remember that stuff. But once you start a new interaction, then the AI is not going to remember. So those are a few things that generative AI in general is not that great at. But let's bring this back to L&D specifically. So now that I've talked for a few minutes about some of the use cases and some of the sort of the functional categories that AI is good at and not so good at, how can we apply these to some L&D domains? This is not a comprehensive list, but if you're in L&D, these are probably some of the things that you touch, right? So I won't read you every bullet on here. You can look at these. But AI offers potential to assist us with all of these domains within L&D. So, just as a grab bag, right? LMS metrics, helping us analyze learning analytics, helping us deploy regulatory compliance training, help us with talent development plans, helping us design curriculum or training pathways, things like that. AI can help us with all this stuff, right? But the real thing that I want to direct your attention to about this is if I apply some qualitative risk labeling to this, not all of these domains are created equal, right? So on the left, this entire list I've labeled in green because they're relatively low risk, in as much as any AI use can be low risk because you always want to scrutinize and supervise the AI because the AI can and will make mistakes. You don't ever want to copy and paste something into your final deliverable. Definitely use AI for first drafts. Definitely use AI to help you design outlines or agendas. Definitely use AI to suggest things or to summarize stuff. It's great at that, but don't ever make the mistake of just copying and pasting that and passing it on down the line as a final deliverable. It's a good way to get in trouble. But with that said, these items on the left, you can go for it, right? It's pretty low hanging fruit. AI can help us with these types of L&D needs. But if we go over here to the right, and you can see why, things that require a little bit more caution are in yellow. And you can see why that might be when you're dealing with compliance or where you might be out of compliance or be facing fines or getting in trouble. You want to be a little bit more, you want to have a little bit more supervision and establish controls that will obviously help you guard against errors or hallucinations or just low quality output. It might not be erroneous, but it just might not be that good. Performance management, if you're dealing with people's career paths, you're grading them essentially. So like if you're grading people or assessing their performance, that's something that L&D stakeholders may play a role in. AI can help with that stuff. It's not that it can't, but you just want to be a little more careful. DEI is a little more of a sensitive area. Analyzing people's performance on assessments or learning programs, in anything that touches technology. These are slightly higher risk areas. And then these bottom two here that are in kind of the red or pink color, obviously, if you're touching anything that has to do with money or contracts, or you're touching something that actually integrates with your IT systems, then you want to be extra careful, right? So again, there may be opportunity to use AI in these areas, but this just kind of helps you get your head around where's the most short-term value that's available to me as an L&D professional to use AI. So this is kind of how I think about these domains, right? So always be cautious, always supervise. Using AI as a partnership between you and the AI tool. You don't ever want to just let it, run unfettered, copying, pasting that content. But as you move through this list, the sensitivity grows, and so does the risk. So that's what I have to say about that. All right, now I want to talk a little bit about how I actually try to identify use case potential if I'm doing L&D work or really any type of professional work. So if you're in L&D and you're tasked with helping other teams in the organization learn how to use AI, or you're tasked with providing enablement for AI adoption, this is a lens that I find very useful as you start to help people canvas their work, look around the types of tasks that they're responsible for, and identify, is this a good fit for AI or not? And the way that I like to think about this is think about what are machines good at and what are people good at, and vice versa. And if you look, what you realize is that where machines are good, it's actually quite complementary to what humans really aren't great at, right? So people don't like to do the same thing over and over the same time 1,000 times in a row. Well, a machine's great at that, right? So anywhere that there's repetitive mechanistic work, or you have to do the same thing in the very same way consistently, or you have to do it 24/7, some kind of automation, or you have to do it at a very large level scale. Machines are great at this stuff. And humans are not great at it. Humans get bored, humans get tired, humans make mistakes. These are areas where people aren't very good. And then on the flip side, if you look at where the machines are limited, they don't have any emotional intelligence. They don't understand context. They can't task switch. They can't pivot and adapt to changing environments and changing circumstances as well. Machines aren't good at that stuff, and neither is AI, but we as humans are good at that stuff. So if you want to think about using AI, this is always where I like to start, right? Start with, is it a good use candidate for a machine? Because AI fundamentally is a machine. It's a robot, right? Now, there's an economic consideration here as well, because as AI is able to do more and more of the things that previously required humans to do, but maybe you didn't have to use that much cognitive ability. It was kind of repetitive, kind of boring. You're manipulating something on a spreadsheet, or you're doing some kind of basic data analysis, or you're writing project updates, or you're writing multiple choice questions. You don't have to be all that smart to do that, but you do have to have a brain. Those are areas where the machine brain might be able to do some of that work for you. So the value of humans doing that kind of work is going to become less and less. But on the flip side, as machines are able to do more of that stuff, there's going to be a higher demand for these human strengths over here on the right. So that's kind of how I like to think about it, right? Is it a good candidate for using AI? View it through this lens and see. And once you have that, you can kind of start to pinpoint these use case candidates with some automation criteria. Where in our work are we doing routine tasks, working with data, because AI is great at working with data? Where do we have to do the same thing over and over? Standardized operations, right? Where do we have creativity limits, stable environments, or we're doing things at scale? Those are the types of use cases that are good candidates for AI. So again, this is just a place to start, is we're thinking about how do we pragmatically incorporate AI into enterprise workflow. So that's where I like to start, right? Now, this is just a screenshot from one of our classes. If you ask teams, going back to this, if you ask teams to think about tasks that they do in their job that fall into these categories, this is just one screenshot from a class where I'm asking a group of project managers to come up with those types of tasks, and you can see that they don't have very much problem coming up with tasks like that, right? So right out of Miro here. In Miro, if I give these teams a 3-minute timer and I ask them to come up with as many tasks in their job that look like this, right? This is what it looks like. So each and every one of these things is a reasonable candidate to think about, could AI help? And in general, AI could help, right? So if you have boring, repetitive, mechanistic work, whether you're a project manager, you're sitting in HR, you're an instructional designer, you're a facilitator, you're a product owner, you're a software developer, we all have professional work that looks like this, right? And teams will have no problem coming up with this type of work. So anytime you can identify work that kind of fits this criteria, boom, you've got a use case candidate for applying AI. So where does that translate in L&D? Here, again, not an exhaustive list, but just a short list of areas where I think and have found, based on working with L&D teams, that there's a lot of utility available right away. You can draft content, analyze LMS data, design learning pathways. As long as the AI knows what the goals are, what the learning objectives are, and it understands who your audiences are, AI can give you quite intelligent recommendations about learning pathways. Conversely, adaptive learning experiences, branching scenarios. AI is pretty good at this. You have to work with it a little bit. You have to make sure it understands the context. But once it does, it can do these things. Right now, these things in the middle here, adaptive learning, branching scenarios, gamification, interactive content, that is the type of thing that's not new to us in L&D just because we have AI. Those are the kinds of things that L&D professionals have been interested in for a long time. We're always trying to drive more engagement from our learners or provide more personalized learning pathways. But let's face it, those things take a lot of work. And a lot of times in L&D, we're not always able to deliver the capacity that it takes to deliver personalized learning recommendations for an enterprise of thousands of people, or hundreds of cohorts or whatever. We would love to do it, but we just don't have the time. And that's where AI comes in. AI can draft and design things like this for us. And now all of a sudden, still with us in the driver's seat, we have an opportunity to use AI to help us do a lot of these things that we've maybe been asked to do or we've been interested in doing, but it's just a really heavy lift to do some of this stuff. So if you're like me, you find that you'd love to do some of these things, but it's just a really heavy lift to incorporate this level of design into our learning work. But AI can help us with that a lot. And then these last few here, no-brainers for AI, language-based use cases that AI is quite good at, providing feedback, helping us parse feedback, assessment responses, survey responses, analyze and identify key points from those things. Using predictive logic to look at learner metrics and say, hey, I've identified spots where this somebody might need some remediation or might need an intervention. AI is great at spotting that kind of thing. Now, if we're analyzing data in an LMS, our LMS may have features for that kind of thing, but it may not. And if not, then we can use these newer generative AI tools to do that for us. As long as we can get the data out of our systems, even if it's raw data, AI doesn't care. AI does great in analyzing raw data, and it can translate those things into recommendations for remediation and stuff like that. And of course, good old-fashioned communication and project management, great use case for AI. Anything that's written content. Now, I wouldn't recommend using ChatGPT to draft the executive summary for your C-level presentation. But if it's just daily updates or drafts of emails or something like that, AI might be good place to help. So just a few suggestions for where we can use AI in L&D work. Now I want to show you a little example of what I'm talking about here, right? So as I said, context is everything. AI only understands as much as you give it. But there's a corollary to this. It's called generative AI, right? Because the generative AI, Gen AI generates stuff. It synthesizes, it makes stuff. But AI isn't just a creator. And it's not always even that good of a creator. Where I find actually AI to really help a lot is when you're not asking it to create anything from scratch. You're giving it something that a human has created, and then you're asking it to exercise its artificial intelligence to manipulate that content in some way, right? Or to do something with it. So when I think about this, I think AI in a lot of ways, it's actually better at parsing existing content than it is at creating new content. It's better at taking a meeting transcript and identifying the action items. It can do that just as well as a human. But if it synthesizes the content of a meeting, then it's going to look kind of dumb, right? So I want to show you what I'm talking about here with a little demo. So give me just 1 second. All right, so in a moment, I'm going to show you an example of a little white paper. Now, let's imagine for a moment that I am in L&D and I've been tasked with generating some learning content for my sales team. So let's say I've got the expertise that I need, but I don't have any training content, right? So let's think about this for a moment. Okay. So here, I've got a little white paper, right? I've got a little white paper from Vantage that focuses on the skills that a sales professional needs to become a consultative seller and to develop trusted advisor relationships. So if you've ever dealt with anybody in sales, this is a pretty common theme, but Vantage is good at this. They've written some good content. So I've got this white paper here, right? So clicking away from the white paper, what if I want to turn this white paper into learning content, right? So now if I asked ChatGPT, please write me a learning module on developing trusted advisor relationships for my sales team. Right? Like ChatGPT is going to be happy to do that, but it might not be very good, right? It's certainly not going to be as good as the experts at Vantage Partners have who have provided us with this expertise in the white paper. So rather than asking ChatGPT to produce the learning content, I want to take the white paper, which has human generated expertise, and see if I can't turn that into some learning content, right? So if I come here to, and I've got this preloaded because I've learned the hard way, don't do live demos when you're presenting to an audience, because inevitably something will glitch out. So what you can see here is in my paid ChatGPT 4 subscription, I've loaded the Vantage Partners white paper here, and I've provided ChatGPT with this prompt. You are my ID assistant. Take this white paper and I want to convert it into training content, right? So don't do anything until you've read the white paper. Don't do anything until you've ingested the white paper. So ChatGPT plays pretty nice. It confirms for me that it has read and ingested the content of the white paper, so it's now got the expertise. And then I've got a prompt here in which I've told ChatGPT, all right, let's take a crack at drafting an actual little learning module from this content, right? So I've asked it for a few elements: a brief introduction to the importance of the subject, including benefits, a detailed explanation with examples, and then finally a section that discusses challenges and a guide on essential skills and principles. And then finally, number 5, I've asked it to design some scenarios that actually illustrate. So you saw the white paper, and what we see is this is what ChatGPT turns out to me, right? So it has identified the key principles. It's breaking down an explanation of the aspects of the trusted advisor in a sales relationship. So I won't go through all of this, but what you can see is this is starting to look more like learning content. So instead of just being, information that is targeted at some other audience, this is actually starting to look like learning content, right? But it's parsing and manipulating the content in a way that starts to be a little bit more useful as instructional content. Now, what's really interesting is if I come down here and continue to prompt this, you can see that I ask it to design some exercises based on the content. So the expertise that's in the white paper, they don't have anything about exercises or role playing or anything like that, but the AI is pretty good at taking the expertise that's in the white paper and then designing some exercises based on that. And these exercises are good. They're good ideas because it's not just coming up with them from scratch. It's basing them on actual expertise. And then finally, something that most IDs and content developers hate to do is writing multiple choice assessment questions, but AI is great at doing that, especially if you have actual expertise contained in something like the Vantage white paper, and you'll see that, by and large, these are just as good as a human author could do. So it's a good use case, right? It's a good use case because you're not relying on the AI to be the expert. You're just using the AI's cognitive ability to work with existing content. So anyway, so that's just a quick little demo in terms of giving you some ideas for how you might be able to use existing content with AI to transform it, synthesize something new, even if it's just multiple choice questions. Might not be the most interesting AI application, but it could save you a lot of time, especially if you have to write a lot of assessment questions. And I guess that's when I talk about where is the real disruption, this is the point that I want to make. The reason that AI is disruptive is not because it's going to replace lawyers, although it may, but it's not because it's going to radically reinvent the labor force or anything like that. The reason that AI is disruptive is because not for the interesting, sophisticated use cases that you hear about in the media, but then which sometimes oh, well, it actually wasn't as good as we thought at doing that. Oh, how disappointing. No, it's not disappointing. it's actually awesome because the things that AI is good at is doing the most boring, most repetitive, busy work that we all hate to do, right? That is disruptive. It's disruptive to think about getting a cognitive robot to do multiple choice question authoring, right? Like, does that seem like the most disruptive thing ever? Maybe not, but it's disruptive to me as an instructional designer because now I've just saved all that time and the quality of the AI output is probably just as good as a human. It's all about understanding where is it a good fit? Where is AI going to be good at doing something versus, where do I still need the human touch? So, and there's a lot more we could say about this, but I think you get the point for now, right? So now let's pivot from using AI for actually performing content development in L&D or doing L&D clerical work. And let's think about L&D becoming the enablers for the organization. So the first question we'll always run into is, well, they won't let us use this here. What am I supposed to do, right? Obviously, if you take sensitive business data or proprietary customer data or PII or learner data that's personally identifying or sensitive or anything like that, and you dump that into ChatGPT, that's not okay because that's on OpenAI's servers now, and you're out of compliance. That's not gonna be good for policy, right? So we're seeing that if you work in a large organization, right away they probably lock this down. You're not allowed to use ChatGPT. You're not allowed to use Gemini or the other AI tools and things like that. But it's just too good not to use. So we have a question here, right? How can we help enable the organization to adopt policy frameworks and to adopt workflow patterns that make it acceptable to use AI in a way that's compliant with our organization's policies, right? So there's a few different ways to do this. So this slide is just a very simple depiction of the spectrum from fast and cheap over to really gnarly and costly. So over here on the left, you see we just have a normal public ChatGPT 4 subscription like the one I was just using. That's what we're locked down on, right? We're not allowed to use this even though it's the easiest and the cheapest thing. So we've started to encounter the emergence of the private LLM environment. So, if you're an IT director and you go to NVIDIA or you go to OpenAI, they will be more than happy to sell you your own instance of their LLM environment. And now, and I was just teaching a class this morning in which a couple of the students, they do work for Ford, and Ford has created their own version of ChatGPT, right? They've got their own complete environment, the LLM, the model, the data processing pipeline, the tuning, plus all the business data from Ford that's now loaded in there. So now you've got a really powerful tool in which you've got all the utility of ChatGPT plus all the proprietary business data of Ford. And so that's a very powerful tool. But that probably costs $500,000, right? Not every organization wants to invest $500,000 in a private AI tool. So we've got these options kind of in between. Just this year, along about the springtime or so, the big AI tool companies, Anthropic, OpenAI, Microsoft, they've realized that, a lot of organizations are locking people out. They're firewalling these tools because there's reasons that you don't want to use them. But they also recognize, well, not everybody is going to spend $500,000 and perform an 18-month-long project to stand up a private version. So they've started offering these enterprise subscriptions. Now, these usually cost about $60 a month per user. So, if you've got 100 users with that license, you can do the math, right? Like it starts to add up. Before you know it, maybe you are evaluating the cost benefit of standing up a private LLM. But there's a spectrum of options here, right? And the point is, these enterprise subscriptions can provide assurances and controls against some of the security concerns that just using an individual ChatGPT or Perplexity account don't provide, right? So there's kind of a middle ground there, but for sure, private LLMs are still something that we're seeing adopted quite a bit. But anyway, just a little snapshot. How do you figure out acceptable use? You have to help the organization navigate the spectrum of risk versus expense. Now, you might not be directly responsible for that within L&D, but if you've been tasked with providing enablement to the organization, this is something you might want to be literate about. You might find yourself having a conversation about it. But let's think about enablement for the enterprise. Now, this is a very generic roadmap, but there's a lot of things here that L&D can help with. Now, we're not necessarily going to own every single one of these, but we certainly can have a voice at the table and help make intelligent decisions about how we implement the roadmap right now. So starting right here with one, as with any project or product, we want to always start with the business requirements. What is the business need? It's really easy in this world of generative AI tools and all this stuff does all these neat things. It's easy to get distracted by the tools themselves, or some executive stakeholder. Oh yeah, I read in Harvard Business Review all my competitors are implementing private LLMs. We got to get on board with this. That's not the right approach, right? The right approach is, what is our business trying to do? How are we providing value to our customers? How are we providing value to our learners? What do our learners need, right? Like, what do the populations that we serve with enablement, what do they need? Start with that. And then from there, start to look at where AI is a good opportunity to help. Now, this certainly is our responsibility as we start looking at, well, do we have onboard AI just within our LMS? A lot of LMSs are providing this native onboard AI capability. Just last month, Articulate came out with their onboard AI for ID. Pretty cool. Cornerstone, LMS, Docebo, LMS systems like this are rapidly integrating native onboard AI, and that can help you integrate with these plans. But whether it's us evaluating our AI tools or whether we're helping the rest of the organization get up to snuff with AI, these are all things that they're going to need to do, right? Even if we're not doing it for them, we can help them do these things. We in L&D, we understand how to provide good guidance on research. We understand how to translate information into action and enablement. And we can help the rest of the organization do that type of thing too. Develop an integration plan. That can be within L&D, or it can be us helping the rest of the organization with that plan. You've got a really basic plan right here on this slide, but each one of these would decompose into its own sub-items, right? And so even if it's just providing templates like this to other departments, we can use little tools and little giveaways like this to help them organize their work. Always going to have to collaborate with stakeholders. Good AI strategy, never going to happen in silos. And then, as with any new tech initiative, there's going to need to be some QA, need to be a pilot group, need to be testing. We can help with some of those things. And then, of course, we get over here to training and enablement. For good change management, we always have to employ training and enablement. And that sits right within L&D teams, right? So coming back to L&D, this is one area where we can really help the rest of the organization. We can completely generate training and enablement material on AI, whether it's by function, AI for the PMO, AI for the business analyst, AI for HR, AI for software teams, AI for agile teams, et cetera, right? Like, we understand how to develop learning content for those teams, and that type of enablement goes a long way. And then, of course, as with anything, it's not just set it and forget it. We want to keep an eye on things and look for opportunities to improve and make sure that we're actually getting the outcomes that we need. So super basic overview of a very basic integration roadmap with an emphasis on the areas that we as L&D leaders can contribute to in particular. Right? So this is the readiness assessment I mentioned. I've got an example of this. So one thing that we know how to do very well in L&D is administer assessments, administer surveys, collect feedback, assess people. that can be a really good tool as we're paving the way for AI enablement, even across other functional teams outside L&D or HR. This is something we can help with, right? We can probably help do this within the LMS or within other systems and tools that we have. And I've got a sample assessment like this that I'll be happy to share with you guys as well if you want a place to get started. It's not super fancy, but this sample is oriented towards L&D teams. Within L&D, this could help us collect responses, collect feedback on how our teams are feeling about using more AI tools, right? And just administering assessments and surveys is a really good way to do this. So I'll be happy to share that, or else we'll share it in the follow up. All right, I think this is my last slide for you, and then if I've got time, I've got a bonus little demo I'll show you. How can L&D leaders help enable the adoption organization-wide? So I just showed you the roadmap, right? If the roadmap becomes number one here, these are some other areas where L&D can serve as enablement champions here, right? I just explained to you how we could administer the readiness assessment, but we can also help with some of these other things as well, right? We can educate on data privacy and ethics, because that's a very sensitive area that's very important if we're going to start using AI. Obviously, we can help with upskilling and talent development. We can help facilitate collaboration and partnerships, even if it's just enabling other teams with the knowledge of how they need to collaborate. Who do they need to engage? We can help our teams become more literate by, for instance, helping them understand, oh, you know what? If you're going to do well with AI, then you're going to need to collaborate with your data engineering department so that the integrity of the data your AI is ingesting is really good, right? Just one example. As I mentioned, probably with AI's help, we can deliver personalized learning experiences that are oriented around upskilling for AI. And then whether it's our own data or whether we're enabling other teams on how to use data, we can help make better decisions, either using the AI or using any data that's available for us. So just 7 ways that L&D teams can help enable the organization here, right? So yes. So, all right. It's 1:51. I think I've got time for the demo. So, in the classes, when we're training L&D teams on using AI to help with L&D work, we've gotten a lot of interest on the image generating AI tools. So, obviously we work with a lot of instructional design in L&D. We develop a lot of content. We're dealing with a lot of content in L&D, and there's always the opportunity to make that content look better. There's always a need to visualize, right? So I wanted to show you just a few of the projects that I've used image generators for here recently, because it's pretty interesting. Now, just a couple quick hits about the image generators. There's several tools out there. They still use large language models, but the way they use them is different than tools like ChatGPT. And I won't get into the technical specifics of that today, but suffice to say, it's pretty amazing what they can do. And by the way, like all the imagery that I use in my presentations, this is all AI generated. So all these graphics, I've used AI to generate all this stuff. So these are all cooked up by AI, including this one. Well, thanks, Laura. I appreciate that. Couldn't do it without AI. So I wanted to show you a couple examples, right? So on the left here, this is just an example of an image that I used AI to generate when I was putting together a few months back a learning module on a cybersecurity topic. So the IT compliance, email phishing and scamming related module dealing with these topics. So pretty cool, right? Like you can see kind of like the evil virus and the circuit board and all this. It's pretty fun. Yeah, I love playing with these. I use a tool called Midjourney to put this type of thing together. So that's just one quick hit here. Now, a couple things to understand. Now, it depends on what kind of image you want to generate. Now, the image generators are not good at designing graphics that contain like writing. They can't spell very well. They're not good at like charts and graphics that are illustrating business processes or business information. They're good at illustrating stuff, right? So if you need a diagram, I guess that's how I would put it, right? Like a diagram, not good. But an illustration or a drawing or a graphic that just kind of helps spice up your content, that's a good use case. David, what do you type into an AI image tool to get an image like that? I will share that with you here in a moment. I want high definition. I include the words high definition. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess just to quickly hit David's question, what I find that you have to do, you got to spend some time tinkering around with the criteria that you want to use to give the image generator its guardrails around generating the image. So that includes parameters like color palette, emulating the style of a designer or an illustrator that you like, aspect ratio, size, stylistic stuff. Like I want it to be like screen printing style or oil painting or a journalistic photograph or an aerial photograph. Give it a white background, things like that. And then once you come up with a style that you like, you can kind of save those parameters. Also, you can upload reference images as well. So once you have an image or two that look the way you want, upload those as examples, give it the parameters, and then it's just a matter of dropping in the subject matter, and you can generate image after image that is stylistically similar. Now on the right, you see I recently developed a class on DevOps for O'Reilly, and so just to illustrate what I'm talking about, I'm just going to show you the content for this class, and you can see what I mean. So I'll bring this over. All right, so I'll skip through all this stuff. So here, like if you look at this little graphic down here, this isn't critical to the slide, right? Like the information on the slide is contained in the text and the diagrammatic content. But if I've used a graphic like this, the thing that you can notice is it uses O'Reilly's colors and branding style, so it's very consistent. And then as I get into these other concepts, continuous integration, here I've got this graphic I've done in Midjourney that's like my little continuously integrated river of data. The deployment pipeline, it illustrates these abstract concepts pretty nicely. Infrastructure as code, and all of these are following the same stylistic guidelines, database CI, on and on, right? So when I'm talking about monitoring and alerts, here I've got like the little speedometer that's talking about infrastructure monitoring, containerization. Here I've got my little like shipping port, and all of these are just like generated in Midjourney, and they're all stylistically consistent, and they use O'Reilly's colors. So am I like? Is it like generating the learning content? No, but it's helping my content look really nice and be more engaging and reinforce the concepts. So just one example of how I get a lot of utility, and I use generative AI produced images for slide decks a lot, as you can see. So anyway, just with the time that we've got today, I saw a remark, by the way, in the chat about UML. That's a very good point. We don't have time to talk about that today, but that's another avenue for doing visualizations and using AI to generate graphics. L&D people, that might not be your jam, but play with Plant. Go to plantuml.com and use ChatGPT to translate project plans and content into work breakdown or roadmaps or dependency diagrams. Very cool. And then within ChatGPT 4 as well, it's got the data analyst, and you can actually use that to do data visualizations as well. And in our L&D class, we actually walk through how to do that with LMS and learner data. Pretty useful. So guys, with 2 minutes to spare, even though we started a couple minutes late, That's what I got for you. So, Laura, I'll kick it back over to you and
Great.
let you close us
Thank
out.
you so much, Chris. This has been incredible. I hope you all learned something or took away something. Please do let us know in the chat or reach out to us afterwards with your feedback. We always like to hear how things land with you all and really helps us to gear our topics in the future. Real quick, I will just say that Chris is the instructor of our AI for L&D course, as well as our AI for PM and some other courses. I'll be following up with you all with the links to all of those. And I don't know if you all saw in the chat, I did also put some coupon codes there for you all. We have some really nice specials running towards the end of this year and even early next year. We've got a nice discount code that we'll be sending all of you. And we would love to chat with you further about your AI plans for your organization. We have a lot of ways that we can support you. And I just want to just really quickly, in case you're not familiar with skills development group and some of our capabilities. I'm going to just share a quick slide. We actually can help build your AI transformation plan from concept through execution. We have AI consulting and planning. We've got courses to train your leadership, including AI for executives, AI for managers and leaders. Both of those courses developed by Chris Knotts and taught by him as well. So, in addition to the role-based training for your team, if you want to expand out the capabilities of your teams. We have AI for project managers, for business analysts, for software testers, and more to come in 2025 that we're currently working on launching. So all the way through to consulting and training for your tech deployment. So please do reach out to us if we can support any of those efforts. We would be happy to chat with you about that. And as always, we appreciate your time and attention. And if we can serve you in the future, please do let us know. I'll be following up with the recording and some other resources after this is over. So thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and we'll be in touch. Take
Thanks,
care.
everybody.